Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Michael, thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I love doing episodes with you. It's so effortless. Today we are talking. Today we are talking about how you write a winning offer in a really strong market. And I wanted to pick this topic because the news cycle, excuse me, has been stating for a bit that the market's depressed and home values are down and blah 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 blah, but it's bunk. I mean, really, in this area, in the DC area, which I've said 8 million times is an insulated market, we basically don't have a lot of inventory right now, because sellers don't want to sell their homes and have to buy a new one. This is assuming they have a loan and have double the interest rate and a higher payment if they're upgrading anyway. And so we've got people who are trigger shy to sell their homes, but you have people who need to buy homes, particular people with families and people who are expanding and literally need to expand their footprint. So it's been a little rough out there. I've had clients lose out in multiples this spring a bunch of times. So anyway, I think it should be noted that this isn't a play-by-play episode, as in something for a client or an agent to follow, because I think a lot of what you and I are going to tackle is the fact that, when you're in the thick of it, you kind of already need to know what you're doing. And a lot of this comes down to relationships and tact and things like that, which are not things you can pick up by listening to a 25-minute episode. Anyway, so Michael, thanks again for coming on. Before we get started, do you have any comments about kind of the market and if, what you think about all that I'm saying here?
I mean, the issues right now are twofold. One, you have people that don't know where they're going to go if they do sell, so they're not selling. And then two, the buyers who are in the market right now are serious buyers. If you have somebody walking through your door, they've already heard everything about interest rates. They've already heard everything about, the market. They know all that, and they've chosen to jump in feet first into the market regardless. So probably if people are coming out to your house, they're going to put an offer in on it. So that's why it's really important right now, because everyone else is just as serious as you are and is just as hopeless as you are. But there's always been, I've been in this market for 11 years, 12 years, and there's always been a hotness. There's been some cool times. If you want to look for houses in the middle of July, you might have a great, opportunity to find a deal, because nobody is worrying about real estate in July. They're all going to their various lovely vacations. But that's about it.
If they can afford it anymore, right?
Right. Well, they didn't have their avocado toast, so they're able to go on vacation.
Oh boy, millennials, we love you. We're actually millennials, so the whole millennial avocado toast thing applies to us. Yeah. Go on.
This is where I'm going to say I love Gen Z too.
Okay, sure.
You can't tell.
We love everybody.
I don't make good enough faces to convey over podcasts. Maybe I should have a face for TV. But anyway, so basically, the market has always been very strong, and where I think you find more often than not is that your relationships as an agent come into play more so than anything else. So, being able to have those conversations with fellow agents about their listings is what's going to help get the home sold to your clients. So if you can go to the client and say,
No, I was just going to say, well, let's not jump ahead here, because we're just going to get to an actual list. So Michael is rearing and ready to go. So we are going to...
I love talking and you love lists.
It's true, actually. The couple of episodes I've had you on as my guest have been kind of listy episodes. Well, whatever. Here we go. Okay, so we're gonna go through a list, guys, and I'll let Michael start, because he started really touching on what I was speaking about in the beginning, which is something that you can't really use as, well, funny enough, as like a list to check off, right? And so, Michael, why don't you get into it? I mean, if we were to give it a label, it would be like, get an agent, but that's kind of like a duh. Of course, you need an agent in a very strong market where homes are going to go into multiple offers. But so now I'll let you take back the mic and kind of explain really what you're talking about.
I mean, I know we've said it a couple times on this podcast while I've been on it, is that, you can use your friend that just got their license as your agent. Please, by all means, do. They need somewhere to start. But when you're in a situation where you think you're going to get into multiple offers, it's not always the best thing to do for you, because you're going to need an agent that's going to have relationships with other agents, that's going to have resources, that's going to have tact. I mean, tact is actually super important, because there's a bunch of different things that we have to get either our hands on ourselves, or we have to ask the agent in a way that isn't, asking them straight up, like, how do I write a great offer for your seller? I mean, you can say that, and they're going to hopefully respond and say, well, they want to move out in June and blah, 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 so that you can ask them things like that. You can say, like, hey, when's their ideal move out time? When, do you think that they're more motivated by a clean offer as opposed to a high price? What's important to your seller? And that's the question I ask every time in multiple offers is, okay, tell me your seller's wish list. Like, what's their top three? And I try to work those into the offer, and hopefully it's something that's relatively free or low price, and we can talk about those specifics later. But sometimes it is going to be like, hey, they just care about money. Like, they just want the highest price and the best price.
Yeah, I think what's important to point out too is if we're talking about getting an agent, having hopefully the right agent for this kind of situation, if there is an agent who is like, all of my clients always went out multiple offers, I just want to right now tell everyone that, like, that's probably not true. Because at the end of the day, real estate agents are not really in control of the situation to the greater degree here. Like, yes, we obviously have an opinion that hopefully our clients will listen to, based on our market knowledge and just, the knowledge of real estate, blah, blah, blah. But, if I have a client who cannot go above a certain amount, or my client cannot do the things that I think need to be done to win, then they can't win in multiples. That's just the fact of the matter.
Well, I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, this house may be worth $650,000 to somebody else. If it's not worth $650,000 to you, that's fine. Maybe it's only 625, maybe, whatever. Like, maybe you don't want to escalate to 650 on this particular house because it's not worth it to you for that price. And so in those times we do lose out. And there are also times when, you just can't, write the right offer for that seller. Maybe they want, whatever, I don't know, rainbows and ponies and unicorns, who knows? But like, there's 1,001 different things that like could affect your ability to get a house. And it's not a reflection on you. It's not necessarily a reflection on your agent. It's just the market. And there's going to be times when you lose, and there's going to be times when you win. And it's just figuring that out. And I always tell my buyers when they're writing their very first offer, and it may be in a multiple offer situation, I always kind of either in the back of my mind or after the fact, after they've inevitably lost it because they didn't listen to me, I say, okay, well, this was a learning experience. Now you know what it takes to win. So let's take that learning and apply it to the next one.
Sure.
So maybe that's a higher EMD. Maybe that's a different situation with their lender, whatever. Like, whatever it is, take that learning and apply it to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this kind of starts to touch on one of my points about this which is that, you want to make sure you're working with an agent who obviously knows what they're doing, but is obviously going to communicate in a way that makes you feel comfortable and taken care of. And to the point where, like, in your example, you may have told them something they have to do and they didn't listen to you, or they couldn't do it or whatever. But you, as the client, want to know that what you, Michael, their agent, are telling them is genuine. You're saying it in a way that's not pushy. You're not saying you have to do X. You're like, listen, this is probably what's going to happen. This is most likely based on my experience and the data, how high this is going to go. This is the information I ascertained from the listing agent that I think needs to be incorporated into your offer. And so communication is already a heated situation, right? Like, buying a house is heated. Spending a ton of money is something that's very, it's really a lot for people. And then, you can feel like you're being taken advantage of in a way, kind of when things are escalating and you're like playing off of other situations, people, et cetera. So really, I think that is key. So it's how you connect with your agent, but how like your agent is connecting with the listing agents and other people. And I mean, the fact is, like, these are things I would consider, like, you're like ball busting mansplainer, like, are you confident that that agent is going to communicate well with an agent that he or she does not, well, probably a he in a mansplaining situation, but that he does not have a relationship with? Like, sure, we all have our friend agents, but you can't throw a rock without hitting 15 real estate agents in DC. So I certainly don't know everyone. So are you confident that I can call that person, connect with that person, make that person kind of like me, or at least not dislike me? That's huge. And you as the client have to have confidence that that can happen, right?
I mean, I've had a million times on both sides actually, where agents have said, "Hey, like you were neck and neck with this other person, but we decided to go with yours because you're either you have been easy to work with up until this point, or you have been easy to work with in the past, or whatever. So we went with yours, even though it was the same offer, whatever, same everything, apples to apples. We just went ahead and I said, hey, I've worked with this agent, or this agent's been great to work with up until this point, blah, blah, blah." But I've also had on the other side where they said, "I'm so bummed. I was rooting for your offer to win. I've always liked working with you, or you've been such a gem up until this point, whatever. But sorry, you didn't get it because they went with other things." There's been both sides, but I think more often than not, the agent who is going to spend the most time working with your agent, which is the listing agent, is going to want to work with somebody that's going to have their stuff together. I don't want to get bleeped. Have their stuff together and be on point and be, a good partner in this transaction. Because, that's all anybody wants is a good partner. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And if you are new, right, if you're a newer agent and, hopefully you're working with, or you have a mentor that can help you kind of, maybe if they do have relationships with other people, or can help you navigate that kind of situation as an agent. Because again, yes, everybody starts somewhere, and a person's personality and willingness to communicate with you, the client, if you're really believing in that, then just make sure that they have somebody who can help them with the agent to agent stuff that they might not have as much experience with. Because, like, you don't want your agent calling your buyer's agent calling the listing agent 18 times to ask questions of stuff that's either, from experience, you can find out through the MLS or talking to somebody else. Because I can't tell you, when I'm a listing agent and I get, a million texts, a million calls, your phone is ringing off the hook when you have a listing that's hot, and you can get frustrated with the person who's not really doing their due diligence and, frankly, being your agent, figuring out what they can on their own.
Yeah. Did you know there's actually a website called letmegooglethat.com
I did
where if
not know
somebody
that.
asks you a question that is very easily Googleable, you just send them that website and like it types the question in for you.
You've probably sent that to me.
I'm sure.
That is a
But
very
somebody
you
sent me
thing.
that the other day and I was like, oh wow, there's actually a website dedicated to being a smartass. I love it. But yeah, I mean, not that all goes into like that relationship with that other agent and figuring out how to either consolidate people's questions into like one quick and easy phone call, or asking the right questions up front so that you're prepared for those when
Yes.
your client asks those questions. And that all kind of goes into experience, which again, love you rookie agents, but like that's important to like have either the resources to know what to do or to just the experience to know what to do.
Yeah,
So.
totally. Okay, so we've, I think, effectively explained those kind of intangibles, if you will, and we'll start going into more of the things that you need to do if you want to make a strong winning offer in multiple situation hot market. So another kind of one is to get pre-approved. But really, I want to go into this one a little bit more too, because you really should get to know your lender. Like in the beginning of the process, you're actually talking to your lender. I wouldn't say quite as much as your agent, but a lot. You probably, I mean, this is assuming you're getting a loan, by the way, right? Either get pre-approved, or if you're paying cash, great. But right now, especially spring 2023, like rates have been changing. There's a lot of news about what's happening with the economy. So your payments may change. So let's say you got into multiples 2 weeks ago, and now you're getting into potential multiple situation now. Even if the amount of the sales amount and your taxes are pretty much the same, your payment could be astronomically different. So, or what feels astronomical to you. So really being able to work with a lender who's going to be ready to talk when you need to talk, or has a team that can talk with you and is frankly ready to jump when you need them to, which might sound kind of crazy. I always say like, I'm ready to jump when you need me to, but like, I don't know, that's our job. Our job is to kind of be on all the time, or in the case of you and I, kind of get somebody to cover for us if we're not available, right? I mean, like that's important. But so another thing is, you're definitely going to want to introduce your lender and your agent to one another in the process. Like I personally have a lender list of, close to 10 people, because there are a lot of lenders that I trust and like, and think they do a good job. And so I often send this list to my clients and they can choose who they want to work with. So in that case, I already know that lender. I have an existing relationship with him or her. But if you're a buyer and you have a relationship with a lender you really want to work with, it is imperative in this situation that you introduce your agent to the lender, because just like how there's kind of behind closed doors negotiating between agents sometimes, there are things where like you don't have to get the buyer or buyers on the phone with the lender and the agent. The two of them just need to communicate.
Yeah, and I think it's important because also in this competitive market, obviously everyone knows cash is king, and there are ways in which your lender can help formulate your offer so that it is competitive with cash. May that be, getting you pre-approved 100% up until, just insert the property here. That can get you, so you can waive the financing contingency. They could, if it's a condo, they could say, hey, this building's already approved, like we're ready to go. Like, you can waive appraisal because they're good for XYZ. And that's going to come into a lot of the relationship between the lender and the agent is going to come into play a lot when we're formulating the offer, because I need to be able to trust as an agent that what the lender tells me is true and accurate, and I'm not getting my buyer into a sticky situation. But I also need to just be able to say like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Help us get there, and know that that lender is going to be able to do it. And then also communicate that buyer's situation to the listing agent in a way that's going to make them a more compelling buyer. So the listing agent is going to call everybody's lender if you're buying it if you're financing it. So having a lender that is just as personable and just as great as your listing agent isn't kind of important, because they're going to be the ones selling you to the listing agent. Your agent can absolutely start the process, but the listing agent is going to put a lot of weight in what the lender says. And if the lender says, yep, they're good to go, there's no way that this deal can fall apart, et cetera, then that's another part that's another, notch on your belt. That's another, bonus on your side.
Here's a good example. So when I have, there are offer deadlines usually when you've got multiples, and I will write my offer letter and I'll write the offer, I'll send an email, I ask them to confirm it. And I almost always CC the lender and say, you're welcome to contact them. But I like it when my lender reaches out, and they can't keep track of when offer deadlines are for their 10 different clients that week. So I have these lenders in my phone by name. It's not just a random 202 number or whatever. And they have me in theirs as well. So I can text, Brad and say, Brad, we just put in the offer, or we're putting it in 10 minutes. I need you to call this listing agent. Here's their phone number, please and thank you. And that is something I feel more comfortable doing, either if I have a relationship with that person, or again, if you've introduced me and we've had all of that back and forth before. And it does go a long way in multiples. I mean, the worst thing, this has really bothered me when I'm a listing agent, is I call the lender and they don't pick up. They don't call me back. They don't text me back. And, we have set a deadline, and we have verbally told people we're going to wait, or we're only going to wait until the end of the night to make a decision. Everybody's interested in ratifying, blah, blah, blah. So, that's a huge deal. I mean, luckily in that situation, it wasn't the top offer anyway, so we weren't left kind of really waiting in the lurch, but that doesn't leave a good taste in anyone's mouth. So yeah, I'll say that. Okay, we are long-winded, so we're going to kind of keep going with this list. So something I want to add kind of in relation to lending is, do not lowball if you're paying cash, okay? I'm sorry. Everyone's like, oh, cash is king, blah, blah, blah. First of all, some sellers and listing agents don't put as much value in cash offers necessarily. And especially if there's a higher price and the person's lending is solid, okay, sure, thanks for your $500,000 offer, but this person's willing to pay $550,000. Their lender is awesome. They're putting 40% down, whatever, like they've got cash if they don't somehow get this loan or, whatever the case may be. And so that is something I want people to know. That happened to me a month ago. I got 5 non-contingent offers. One was cash under asking price. And I was like, thanks. Like that was literally the first one we crossed off the list. So just going to put that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's also, that speaks to the agent too. Like the agent should have said, hey, like there's some multiple offers. Nobody's going to take an offer that's under asking. Even if,
but maybe but maybe that person didn't listen. So that's my earlier point that the agents don't have control. You can have somebody who's just like, I don't care. This is my offer. Okay,
maybe
cool.
that was their one to learn on.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Or maybe that's just how they purchase properties, right? People all have their own things. Like I only put offers in that end in 7, or if I pay cash, I won't pay asking price or whatever. So, that's fine if that's what you want, but it turns
I've got those kind of clients too. I say, then you're not buying a property. If you don't pay list price, you don't buy a property.
Yeah. I mean, to our kind of the whole point of this is when it's a hot market and you're trying to win in multiple offers, if you're really trying to win, then you're not doing that. So you probably should be offering on a place that's not quite as hot.
What I always say, like in this market, it's a menu. Like the price on the right is the starting point. It's not, you shouldn't expect to get like 4%, 5%, 10% off of the list price. No, start there and it's going to go up from there.
Yeah, I mean, there are some exceptions, obviously, like places that just overprice from the beginning. I see that happen with new construction more than anything else. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, yeah, you're right. Okay, so now we're going to quickly go through contingencies because these are the things that really any agent should know. But you want to limit your contingencies when you're writing in multiple offers.
Can we go back to something real quick? I don't mean to interrupt you.
Sure, of course.
No, I just want to make sure that, just to talk about budgets real quick. I just want to make sure that people know that, when you're in a hot market, you need room to grow. So like I said, the menu situation, it starts at that number and it goes up from there. So if your budget is a max of 650, you should probably end your search around 600, 625 so that you have room to go up. Because what's going to happen is if you can't go up further than 650 and you look at houses in 650, you're just going to have a lot of disappointment. So just make sure that when you're searching for things, you search within your realistic budget, and then give yourself a little bit of buffer. So,
right. Yeah.
Sorry, my menu thing made me think about that. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, no, I get it. Okay, so we're back to contingencies. So we'll go through the main ones. So an inspection. So this is the biggest sticking point, I'd say, for almost all buyers. If you're an experienced buyer, first-time home buyer, you want to know that the house is actually in good shape, right? You want to know that the systems are working, whatever. So, if you're gutting a house, if this is like a fixer-upper, then you might not care because you've got to go in anyway. Though I would say if you're getting a construction loan, you're getting a loan, a regular loan, conventional, the appraiser is going to not basically let you get a loan if the house looks like it's not safe, habitable. Basically was what it comes down to. Yeah. But okay, assuming that that's not the case, so you can do a pre-inspection. That's what most people end up doing, which means they do the inspection before the offer goes in. They know what they're getting. They're not negotiating the findings of that inspection, but they're saying, you know what, I'm okay to do a new roof. The roof's a disaster, but I'm okay. That's going to cost $20,000. I can handle that. And then when they write the offer, it doesn't have an inspection contingency, meaning the sellers don't have to deal with it or think that it's an opportunity, or they know it's not an opportunity for you to either renegotiate or walk away from the contract.
I mean, another way around that is if you contact the listing agent and say, hey, how many pre-inspections do you have? And let's say it's 5. And then how many offers are you expecting? And the number is also 5. That means that 5 people did a pre-inspection on that house and still went through with the offer. And if this house isn't I'm going to win this house, I'm going to, put everything into winning this house, then you can probably forego that pre-inspection because those 5 people who just did a pre-inspection already looked at it, checked under the hood, and are still putting in an offer. Saves you some money, and you don't necessarily need the list that they got because you may not even go through with, you may not be the one that's putting millions of dollars over asking into it. So.
No, I mean, that's a really good point. I think more experienced people in the market are more willing to do that, but it's certainly something to consider. And I actually had clients, they decided not to offer ultimately, but there were 8 pre-inspections that happened and they were expecting they were expecting 5 at least, right? Like you don't actually know until there's an offer in hand. But yeah, they were like, forget it. We're just not getting an inspection. I was like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, appraisal. So this is something that you can waive appraisal. This one's a little bit tough because you can't not get an appraisal if you're getting a loan, right? Like, well, sometimes an appraisal can be waived by our lender depending on various situations. We won't get into it. But if you are going to have to get an appraisal, then it's important to know if you waive it, what that means. And your relationship with your agent and your lender definitely come into play here, because if a home doesn't appraise, things are escalating. You pay, $200,000 over asking price, but the home's not necessarily going to appraise for that. Your lender needs to really explain to you what that means in terms of your money. You're going to have to bring cash to close potentially. Maybe you can put less down. I mean, it really depends on what's happening with your loan. And if you're really tight on money, especially if you escalate to the top, that can be, that has to be a factor. That has to be something you're discussing before you put that offer in.
And this is especially important in emerging markets or markets that are currently, on the upswing, so it may be that right now it's not worth 650. And in 6 months from now, it may be worth 650 or 700, 800, who knows? I mean, I had that happen during the peak of the pandemic where a client of mine went to the absolute top of their range with the escalation, got the house, but then they owned a house that was $50,000 more than any other house in the neighborhood. And now I think they have like almost $200,000 worth of equity because just the values kept growing and growing. Right. So, I mean, there's, that's a lender conversation so that what that's going to do to your loan to value, ratio, and what that's going to do to your interest rate, which right now, as we're all hearing about, interest rates are, already pretty high. So just know what that's going to do, and know that what waiving appraisal will do to your situation, and be, just go into it educated.
Yeah, for sure. And when I said it also, the agents come into play here. So just really quickly with appraisals, it's done by a bank, it's done by your lender. The listing agent is the person who can interface with an appraiser and send them comps to try to say why the price that you're paying is actually the right price, right? It should appraise for that amount. So what they're going to do is, first of all, they'll already have those comparables, those comps ready, because that's probably how they priced the house in the first place. But they may know places that are under contract in the area and what that is appraised for, and that will affect what the appraiser assesses. And so if you have your buyer's agent who has a relationship or can make a relationship with the listing agent, this just happened to me. My clients get under contract and I was like, I don't think this is going to appraise. I could not find a way for this to appraise without knowing the appraisal values of 2 homes under contract in the neighborhood. And I spoke with the agent. I was like, listen, here's the deal. They can't afford it. Okay. They can afford if the appraisal comes in low. I'm concerned though. Can we talk about comps? And he's like, sure. And we had a full conversation. I felt more confident. I passed it on to my clients who felt more confident. We still know that it can come in. Our appraisal is being done today. We still know that it can come in low, but we know that everyone's done everything they can to make sure that appraisal comes in higher, as high as possible. So that's a relationship thing again.
Yeah. And there are ways to get a winning offer that include an appraisal contingency. It's just, you're going to want, again, that great lender who can do an appraisal super fast and get it back super quickly. So you can do like a 5-day, 7-day appraisal, with maybe a 14-day financing contingency. My favorite combination, if I'm going to put contingencies in, is a 7-day appraisal, 10-day financing, because also it's nice to just be able to breathe, towards the end of the loan. That the appraisal's done, the financing's done, and you're just sailing towards settlement. So I think quick with all contingencies and multiple offer situations, quick or non-existent. So.
Right. And so the next, we'll really quickly go through financing as another contingency. So that's something that you want to do it as quickly as possible. If underwriting before you even put in a loan is possible, you're getting all those documents for your lender and they kind of like pre-underwrite you, that is huge. Yeah. The only other contingency I'll really touch on is condo docs. You and I actually did our last episode was on HOAs and condo associations, and condo docs, that is a contingency that cannot be waived legally by anybody. But what can help is if you ask the questions that might come up in a condo doc review period. What's the budget like? Can you tell me what the pet policy is? Can you tell me the rental policy? Any good buyer's agent and who knows that those questions are important, or even if they don't, I'm always asking about rental policy, for example, because even though you don't plan on renting it out now, for example, you may down the road, going with your eyes open and knowing those answers. And, those are things that can really help because again, you can't waive that contingency.
And one thing that we're seeing a lot of now these days is folks taking care of some of these other contingencies during that condo doc review period. So like doing their home inspection during the condo doc review period, instead of putting in a home inspection contingency, things like that, so that you can have the peace of mind, but you don't have to necessarily, use your contingencies, which might scare off a seller.
Yeah.
Another thing that is a lot of times very, very helpful, and especially pertinent in the spring market right now, is rent backs. And that's when the seller basically pays for a license to use your home. I'm going to use like the most legal terminology possible. They license your home for a period of time, which is like usually around 60 days. And that comes into play now when people are trying to sell their homes and then buy their next one. So that they want the cash, they want 60 days to find their next home, or they want to finish out, Julie and Steve's, elementary school or whatever. They just want to live there for 2 more months, and offering those for free is a great low cost way to get a house, because people are like, okay, great, I don't have to worry about things for 2 months. I don't have to worry about paying rent. I have the house for 60 days. Good.
Yeah, what this comes down to is one of our last things, which is being flexible and giving the sellers what they want. So in the beginning, we talked about how your buyer's agent is hopefully connecting with the listing agent to find out what's important to the sellers. Yeah, I would understand if I had kids not wanting them to be yanked out of their school, or even having to move and commuting to their school for 2 additional months, for example, if they're listing their house now and closing in April. That makes perfect sense. If you have multiple offers, people are going to try to bend over backwards to give the sellers what they want. The sellers are probably okay with paying for that license, as you said, but they definitely would prefer it to be free. So if you can wrap that into the numbers and the financing and the financial logistics of this transaction, that's something to consider. Same with closing date. I had clients who wanted a rent back for 2 months. My clients were like, listen, we can do a month. But they had the highest offer. And so what we did was we actually pushed closing back. We had initially given them a very quick closing date of 2 weeks. And they said, listen, how about we push closing back 4 weeks? And then you can do that rent back for, the free rent back for a month. And it just made sense. So that's a communication rent back thing. Okay, literally, this is the longest episode we've ever done. So we will just quickly jump through the last 2 things. Earnest money deposit. That is your, deposit that you're putting on the line saying, hey, if I were to default on this loan, this is what I'm willing to lose. In this situation with multiples, you're probably not getting ready to walk away from the contract, right? So, I mean, for me, this one feels silly to have to give a huge earnest money deposit. But that could be something that's important to the sellers, right? They could have had somebody walk on them before. Maybe they walked once, and they're like, hey, I walked away when I only had $10,000 in the grand scheme of this, $1.5 million place. Like, yes, money is money, but we get cold feet or whatever. So understanding that and knowing, it used to be 1% to 3% in Virginia, 3% to 5% in DC and Maryland was kind of a minimum. And it is still a minimum, I would say. But, the more you want to express to somebody that's what your interest is, sure, you can give more.
Basically, an offer is, and maybe we should set this at the top of the episode, an offer is you giving the seller as much information as possible on one sheet of paper, or I guess 500 sheets of paper, but it's literally, you have to be able to explain how badly you want this house on, based on 5 different terms, and the earnest money deposit is one of them. And it's like, I want this house so badly, I'm going to give you a 15% earnest money deposit. And if you feel comfortable having that much money tied up at the title company, and that, if you defaulted on the loan or defaulted on the contract, that you would lose that money, then I'd say go for it. The more money, the better. And, it's never going to hurt you to have a bigger earnest money deposit. And it's all part of that, that love letter of an offer to your seller. You
Thank you
like
for
that
bringing that
segue?
up. Yeah, thank you, Michael. So, our last thing, and for the record, I am recording an episode specifically on this topic, which are love letters, which is a letter, that lots of buyers often want to write a letter to the sellers saying, "This is why I want your home." Again, we're not going to really get into it right now. There are potential issues, I'd say, well, not, I'd definitely say, with writing love letters that border on fair housing issues. But the thing is, my whole point is, don't get emotional in this situation of multiple offers, because it is a business transaction. Yes, it is emotional. You're going to be your home. Yes, you do see your kids in those bedrooms. You do see, your teenager, learning how to drive a car on that street. Like, I get it. But it's not all emotional to a seller. It's usually maybe a little bit emotional, but mainly it's about money. I hate to say it, especially in this kind of area. And so that's something to consider. So, if you want to write a love letter, I would really seriously talk about it with your agent and have him or her explain to you the pros and cons. And if he or she doesn't know the pros and cons, I would consider what that means, because, like, if you haven't been bitten or had a client that's gotten overly emotionally invested with a love letter, then you probably haven't been in real estate that long, or you haven't worked in a hot market. And I really, really, really think that that's something that someone should be careful with.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, there's a lot of fair housing issues that go into play. Because if you're like, I can really see my kids going down the street, familial status.
Yep. Yep.
Our church is down the street.
Religion.
No,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's a million different ways you can get to fair housing that can either be ammunition for that seller to violate your fair housing rights, or for you to give kind of like a dog whistle to them, like, oh, we're the same, wink, wink,
Yeah.
nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Which is kind of gross. And there's a lot of times when the listing agents will, because of the fact that they're fair housing violations, just
Michael,
throw them
Michael,
out.
don't ruin it for everybody. We've got a whole
Okay.
episode coming up on it. So, guys,
All
if you
right.
care about love letters, you're going to listen when it comes out, and I don't
That's
even
my
know, a couple
teaser for
months.
you guys. Coming soon on Rent Move Buy.
All right. Well, this is officially, I think, the longest episode ever. But I do think it's really, really important that people hear all of this stuff. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're in the thick of it, I'm sorry, I guess is all I'll say, because it can be tough and emotionally taxing for sure. But if you are thinking about getting in the market, and one of the things that scares you is what we're talking about, then pay attention to the first two things we said. Find an agent, contact us, contact somebody that you think is going to be the right fit for being able to help in this situation, and get a lender who can do the same.
Love it.
Thanks. Okay, guys, we're signing off. 37 and 36 seconds later, 37 minutes, 30 seconds, whatever. It's even longer now. Anyway, Michael, thank you for coming on, guys, and we will see you soon.